other news, early childhood is a critical stage of development, and ensuring the safety of young children is paramount. Society has a collective responsibility to safeguard children from harm, injury and abuse. Creating a secure environment has also been said to be the first step in ensuring safety in early childhood, which includes installing safety gates, securing heavy furniture and appliances, and storing hazardous materials out of reach. Experts also say supervision is crucial in preventing accidents and injuries, and adults must always be present to monitor children, especially near water, stairs and playground equipment. This is why a ratio of at least one adult to every 3 children has been recommended. Now, for more exposition and recommendation on this subject, we are now turn to child care business expert Caroline Popoola. Good to have you on Newsday.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I like the way you pronounce my name, Caroline Popoola.
I had to come down to it. The actual way. All right. So let's talk about when it comes to safeguarding policy in child care centres. What do you think are the key components here?
So thank you so much. It's really important to have legislation at first. So the first thing is, because for us to know what we're doing, as practitioners, as parents or teachers and so on, we must have legislation. And once we have legislation, that should then lead us to a code of practice, which from our code of practice, staffs and practitioners are being trained, because that's only when you know what to do and what the expectations are. So once we have that, which should be from central government, we're talking about decentralization, because again, in a country like Nigeria or as Africa as a whole, it's important to understand culture, because culture plays a very key role in all of the things we do as parents, as practitioners, as a school, in terms of education. So that needs to come in. But it's only when we have decentralization and where each community or local authority are in charge of their own rules and code of practices, that's when we can then decide to start thinking of training practitioners in knowing what to do and what aspects to take in terms of safeguarding. Well, safeguarding is a really, really wide topic and subject. But definitely, when we're looking at things like online safety, when we're thinking about, even when you talked about child-parent ratio or child-staff ratio, those are really key things that needs to be important, that needs to be looked into. When you're talking about maybe types of abuse, understanding abuse in the first place, some things you will call abuse, or we will call as abuse as practitioners, to parents, some culture, it's just normal. And you're thinking, where do we start from? This conversation is so important. We need to have this conversation and start to have legal laws coming in to say, how do we protect these children?
Okay. All right. I'm glad you mentioned laws, because you look at it closely. For who monitors these people in terms of, because my mind is just being pointed towards the teacher-pupil relationship. And if you say probably the ratio is supposed to be 1 adult to about 3 children, and in most schools, especially public schools, a teacher is probably saddled with responsibility of handling 10, 15 of them. And who actually monitors that? Teachers must be trained on how to handle children, and not just for curriculum alone, but for their entire well-being.
Yeah, I agree. And this is why we're calling for legislation. I've been on a few of these TV programs, and I keep saying the fact that these conversations, we've had this conversation over and over again, and I'm sure you have, even on this channel. And we've had other predecessors come before me and talked about this conversation. The one thing we have to do is change. Change must happen. And yes, from what you're saying, we do have children in deprived areas. That's what we call them, in the slums and deprived areas. And I talked about census and the fact that we need to know how many of those children do we even have? How many children do we have in Nigeria, because that's the country we're in and we're talking about, that is under 5? Once we've done our census, we can then start to ask, who do we bring to the table? There's so many private practitioners. You have children. The private practitioners that run incredible schools in Nigeria here. You don't have to go outside of Nigeria to find that. Why don't we get them to the table and start to have this conversation? But if you don't get the people who has the best interest of school or education at heart into a room and onto a table to start to talk about this, to have this conversation, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to be talking, and we're just going to have the same process over and over again with no change. So I hear you, in deprived areas, we do have these children. And when you have teachers that has 30 children or even 50 or 100 children to one teacher, it's not the rule. What do you want to teach that child? How many of them are listening? And in between all of that, you have children with behavioral issues. You have the ones that, you know, literally pulling their hair out. You have the ones that are not understanding even the simple concept of what's been discussed in class. Yeah. So there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. But it starts with change. It starts with us wanting to want change. And I use the BVN stuff. I say this all the time, the BVN stuff. I could tell you, probably 5-10 years ago, if they said we were going to have data together in one area that you could actually know who is Nigerian, who has a phone, who doesn't, who has a bank account, I'm sure you say not in your lifetime. I would definitely say not in my lifetime, possibly not in my children's lifetime. Guess what? It happened. And we do have database of some sort. So why is it that we can't do the same for education? Education is the one thing you can give a world. So why can't we do the same? So we need invested interest, people that have the right interest, the right mindset, that want to change, to come together and decide change must happen, and it has to happen.
All right, talking about the change makers, the people with the right mindset, how do you involve parents and guardians, safeguarding practices in this regard? Because they're part of the change as well.
They are part of the change. And this is what we do differently outside of Nigeria. So growing up outside of Nigeria, having my practice outside of Nigeria and the experience and so on, and wanting to come and change and impact. And I know that there's work to be done. We work as a community. You get parents' involvement. We have things called PTA where you have parents of, and I don't, before you even say yes, but both parents have to work. Yes, they have to work, but you do have some parents where dad does the work and mom don't have to go to work. Yep. And I mean, in a society like Nigeria, we have nannies. Why can't we get the nannies involved? Why can't we get the volunteers in school? And I said earlier in another program, the fact that what's your expectation as a parent? What are your values as a parent? Have you ever communicated that to a school? Have you even asked the school what their own expectations are? What is it they're going to deliver to you? What are they telling you? Because you're paying this fee, because we have your children, this is what we're going to deliver. Have you even asked as a parent? However, if there's an issue, you're ready to up and row and go and fight about it and say, oh, how dare you do this to my child? Have you even asked them, what are you delivering? What would you be giving? Because they probably said to you, oh yeah, we're delivering a British curriculum. You're like, yeah, that's the school. Really? What about merging the British curriculum or the formal curriculum with our culture? Because culture, I say, is what's made us today. Yeah. You can't get rid of that. So why don't we get the best part of our culture and merge that with a formal education and really bring out the best in our children? Yeah. Because again, you can't go back to our children learning about London Bridge or learning about how Obama became president and not knowing anything about Wole Soyinka in Nigeria or Fela Kuti. So that's our culture. We should be telling our own story, and it should come from us and from our children. And it's only when you merge the curriculum, that's where you're able to tell our story the right way. So parents must be involved. And the way to get parents involved is by getting them into schools, getting them to volunteer, getting them to be part of this decision-making in schools. Yeah. We have governors in schools and things like that. All right. Yeah.
Now, so the question will be, because you've harped on the involvement of parents.
Yes.
But the general well-being of the parents is directly related to the general well-being of the child. Because the question is, if the parents are being let down, if they feel let down by the government, how then can you push them or probably coerce them to do the right thing? Because some would say that you're not paying for anything, I'm not getting any handouts from government. Then why should the government put restrictions or put laws or how I train my child when I am completely saddled with the responsibility of raising that particular child.
Yeah.
And when it comes to probably disciplining the child or directing the child the way I feel, you are not trying to probably interfere. That was ballastness.
I like that. You know, so we have something in the UK where obviously when your child, you don't smack children, full stop. You don't raise your voice at children. And then your child turned up to be 16 and it tells you where to get off. And you're thinking, but the government stopped me from smacking and doing this. And then now they said, oh, your mother didn't bring you up well, kind of thing, innit? You know? So I hear you. But the thing is, if we want to change, it starts with you and I. The best time for a change is today. And you can't keep passing the buck. You can't keep passing the blame and blaming somebody else. The responsibility starts with us. If I make a change, my network will make a change. If you want good, you start with you. And eventually it would go round, eventually. If I start with myself, so imagine we have a school with 1,000 children, with maybe 100 parents, and we stand for a change. The good practice from that school will cascade to the next schools. And gradually, the government will have no choice because guess what? All 100 parents will be screaming out loud. They want to change because we believe in that change and we've seen that change in practice. So we can't pass the blame. We have to do something about it.
I was going to ask about the cost of running childcare business, but we've virtually run out of time.
Oh my goodness.
Caroline Popoola, childcare business experts, I would like to thank you for being a part of the show. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me and being kind to me.
All right.